Um, just few seconds. So the theme of our panel is It's Our Culture, Film, Music, and How We Can Change Minds. So we're going to talk, as part of it, we're going to talk about how new waves of creativity and the storytelling have helped to improve people's understanding of a changing world, and also about the clash between what we consider to be traditional values, in quotes, and the ideals of modernization. So I am going to so I'm thinking of a way to,
to start.
Yeah. So let's begin with the most important moment of the year that we had so far. So that was the end. Does everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. So the
I think
most
I'll mix up
important
rooms
moment.
every time, so you know
Okay.
that I'm empty.
Oh yeah, thank you. So the most important moment of the year so far, the NSAS protests, and it was something that the protest began, but it quickly adopted a signature song, if you could call it that, and that happened to be Davido's Femme. But that also called to mind other songs that Nigerians have listened to over the years that have always had this, the tone has been in protest. The tone has been to complain about what has been happening. So I want to ask her, when music tends to embody the spirit of a protest, to what extent does it move people? To what extent does it move people? When you listen to Fela, to what extent are you moved to act as opposed to just think? We can all think, but act.
No.
Tola, could you begin?
No. Speaking on a personal level, when I hear...
Can you please repeat the question?
Obi, so the question so is, to what extent?
So the
question is,
I'm back fully on now. So.
Yeah, we understand. We're all in Nigeria. Right. So the question is, to what extent does music move people to act as opposed to just feel? And the context I gave was the NSAS protest, which quickly adopted a protest song in Davido's Pen, which then calls to mind previous songs that Nigerians have always adopted as their regular everyday protest songs. The songs by Fela, even a few songs by Burna Boy, Dem Mama by Timaya. So to what extent does music move people to act? So Paula, you started, you were saying something.
Yes, music doesn't move me to act at all, to be fair. What it does is so for example, you mentioned Fela now. To me, it sounds like a recording of what happened at the times. So sort of like reading a history book or something, right? So that the songs in question capture that moment, that we're referring to. Same goes for Timaya's Mama. And I can say that when Davido recorded Femme, that's a diss track to another artist you mentioned, Burna, I doubt protest was the thing foremost in his mind. What music does for me is it frames the moment that we're in. So now when you talk about Femme now, even though it wasn't a song recorded for NSAS, you have to now mention NSAS, which is, a protest by which people adopted that song as an anti-authority song, basically. It was saying Femme to authority, So that's what music does to me. It doesn't move me to do anything but listen to the songs, to be fair.
Okay. Do you agree, Peter?
A bit. I agree a bit because I think songs are very important in the sense that for different people they mean different things over time. Some days ago I was reading about Tupac Shakur in Africa. That's the name of the article. You can check it out. Tupac in Africa. So Tupac's song from the West America during the time when we had the Jim Crow era was causing waves in Africa, and Liberian troops and soldiers would have the lyrics of the song on their cars. Nelson Mandela was in jail, and people had his inscriptions from Tupac. Or words on the street was that Tupac was born in jail, and he was able to, speak against authority. And every time he had made the jail his home. He didn't mind what he was going through or the persecutions he was going to face, but then he used his platform as an avenue to speak to people over time. And we saw these songs in West Africa, up to year 2000. I think he died in 19 something, I can't remember, but up to year 2000, we still see is the words of his songs on clothes. People have them as tattoos on their body. And if you look at Brenda Fassie in South Africa, you see that a song was banned in South Africa when Nelson Mandela, who is a cousin, was in jail. Nelson Mandela was in jail, and then South Africa had not had a black president at that time. And then she sang this song called My Future President. Brenda was imagining the future where they would have a president who was black. And so if you look at the protest and everything that happened in South Africa during those periods, the apartheid era, you see that the songs were a very, very good element that helped spur people's mind to change. We look at Fela, Rugged Man, even Genevieve's song. I think I was in secondary school or maybe university, secondary school, when Genevieve came up with that song. And then I didn't understand it much. I didn't know much about feminism or equality, but that song came, and some years later, when I was more aware of my society and how unequal society is towards women. I could relate and say, okay, this is what she was saying here. And it was like the song was so woke before time. And so I believe music really does a lot of work to change.
Yeah. So thirdly, Tola says that she doesn't think music does not move her, but music has the ability to capture, an existing feeling. And Peter partly agrees. So what is your stand on that? Your audio is off.
I can't hear you. No.
Your audio is still off.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I think the extent to which music can influence a particular movement or culture, it's dependent on the artist that would drive that message. So first of all, music is partly a reflection of the consciousness of a society. And I think that people like Bob Marley and people like Fela, they embodied an ideology. And that ideology was they used the music as a vehicle for the message. So they already had a message. And if they were artists in any other form, they would still make their artistic expression about the message. So I do think that what we are seeing is that music can be impactful. We definitely know it can be. But first of all, we need to have our artists embody the struggle, embrace an ideology about change, and see their music as a vehicle to do that. I don't think we have that many of them as we speak. So we can't expect much, because right now, I think apart from Burna and Falz, who I think have been very deliberate in talking about the struggle even before it became a thing, the many other artists are really about the entire gamut of human expression. But you as the artist, first of all, have to embody the message. It's not just something you do in a track. It's not just something you do with an album. It's literally something that you dedicate the rest of your life to doing. You basically see it as a vehicle. So someone like Bob Marley was about emancipation of slavery, right? He sang about redemption song. He sang about, even then, I shot the sheriff, I didn't shoot the deputy. He was reflecting the times in which he lived. Someone like Fela Anikulapo Kuti, across different military transitions, Fela was a consistent voice, calling for transformation, calling for a functional society. What we have here are more artists who see it as something to do to sell an album. I'm sorry, but it's not just something to do to sustain your relevance. It has to come from a place of belief, conviction that this is what my music is about. I'm about a message, and my music is a vehicle for the expression of that message.
Yeah, so we have some kind of conditional consensus that music doesn't, immediately do this, except when there is intent or where the feeling already exists. But I want to ask, could the problem be us? So this is why I'm asking. So you look at in the US, for example. So what you said, Ferdy, Kendrick Lamar, he's putting out albums that managed to, like his albums were, they had this message for Black liberation before Black Lives Matter movement started. And Ibitola, like you said, he had it's like the music came and then it met the right circumstance. And if you moved back to pre-colonial times, you found that if people were going to war, music was the galvanizing force. Of course, they knew they were going to fight, but the music carried them. So is there something that, is it a function of, sort of the disconnect that colonialism has caused? The fact that we are here in this time, we are not responding to music in the way that our pre-colonial people did, and we are not responding to music in the way that, say, other Black people who are being oppressed do. Is that a thing with us as Nigerians? Tola?
There's no believability. I think if you're asking me through music to put my body on the line, to put my life on the line, I have to believe you. Like I said before, Fela's music recorded the times that he was in. We know what he did. We know how he stood up in the face of authority, and his music spoke to his actions. Okay, I'm a very big Burna Boy fan, but there is no, from my side at least, there is no believability of his intentions when he's speaking those words. To me, they're fashionable words to speak to appeal to a broader audience, perhaps, but I just don't believe him. I mean, the music, and I'm not asking the artist to be more activist than your average Nigerian or whatever have you, but the music isn't believable to me. There is a kind of, from my standpoint, and I think Kendrick Lamar is a good example, there is a kind of materialism that you eschew when you are speaking to the people like that, especially when you're speaking to a majority of people that are very poor or poor. So you don't have the big ice on your chest, your Maserati on the streets of Lagos giving out 1,000 naira notes to people. It just seems very convenient, to use Nigerian desperation for change to speak to them, to pontificate to them, actually. And I think this is something that Falz himself is also guilty of. I mean, I think he made that Fela-inspired album, and it was just him pointing the fingers at Nigerian. He never for once looked inside. It was like, you people, you people, you people. So it's almost like, who are you to speak to us in this manner? You don't know our lives. You're not living hand to mouth every day. You were born with a silver spoon. I mean, that's obviously no fault of your own. But now I think Falz has more carte blanche to make that kind of music. He has put himself on the line. We have seen what he's about. But prior to NSARS, I just laughed at it. Like, who do you think you are? And the same thing goes for Burna, right? Okay, he was in London. It says his mother was sick, fine. But when it came to it, he was nowhere to be seen. And it took him 3 days to speak up for the president for whatever reasons. And he's got his own rights to take his time and sort out his personal issues. But overall, there is no believability. I just do not believe these artists when they speak to Nigerians and they speak to Nigerian ills. It just seems like the fashionable thing to do. And I don't think it's a matter of that word always trips me up. I don't think it's a matter of the colonial masters, right? I think it's just a function of the artist. The audience doesn't believe them, and the audience doesn't think there's a point in listening to their words. And thirdly, times are just very different. We have way more things to distract us these days: internet, games, dating apps, etc. Like those days when NEPA takes lights, you go outside and go mingle with your neighbors. Maybe from then you can plan on where you're going to disrupt next. But now we'll do other things indoors. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, Peter, do you think it has to do with us?
Well, I think I get what she's saying, what Tola is saying right now, and I think she's very correct. I mean, Falz, I think the artists really have to ask the body what they are trying to say. So it doesn't look like they're trying to just use us as a tool for making their cash. It's really correct. Really correct.
Have you finished, Peter?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, Samuel.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm having a bit of difficulty
Hi,
with
Samuel.
my internet. Like this is.
Yeah. So we're talking about music and why we are unable to connect to music as the driving force for change in this period, and whether it has to do with us, the listeners, and the time that we're in. What do you think?
To be honest, if we're actually talking about real change that actually translates to real policies, that actually translate to real development, music on its own is more ceremonial than an actual. I actually see music as a catalyst and that's all it does, And for me, it's a tool. It's not actually. It's just a tool, and it's a tool for communicating. And the challenge right now is the people that actually really, really, really need to get this message are not being properly communicated to. And that's because we tend to we tend to see change, or we tend to see it from our own perspective rather than what it should actually be. I.e., a lot of our favorite songs, that actually talks about change is the songs are actually in English and Pidgin. But the major places where we have most challenges, I'm talking about the deep parts of the north, the deep parts of the east, where people have little or no knowledge about what is going on, don't even understand or have a clear path on what that music, what that music is saying. So when we try to come up with solutions, especially through creative ways, we try to do it from what appeals to our own crowd, to our own community, rather than the community that we're actually trying to push the change. So for me, and that's why I said music is a catalyst instead, rather than a factor or something that actually drives real change. It's a catalyst. It starts something. It starts the conversation, and and if we're being honest and if we're being deliberate, then that's where the real change actually comes. Picking one of our favorite artists like Fowls song or Burna Boys and actually translating it to Igbo or Hausa, or collaborating with Hausa or Igbo artists just to reach their audience. Now you have my attention.
Okay, yeah. So in line with Tola, because Tola hints at she says she's suspicious of the capitalist intent behind the social consciousness of the music. And thinking of that and what you said, Samuel, about translating and what Peter has said, I'm looking at what Freddie is writing now about the type of artist. So the question is for you, Freddie. Do you think that it has to take an artist to be entirely, for them to frame their music entirely from this perspective before we would take them seriously? Because there is nobody, like we've established, there's nobody who's yeah, continue.
But I think that when we put on our artists the burden of becoming reformers with their music, or running an advocacy with their music, we're putting on them the burden that they're not designed to carry. The reality of it is that you're not forced to become that. You are that. I don't think there was ever a time Fela thought to himself, well, the society wants a hero. I'm going to be the hero. I'm going to be the voice of the people. If you look at Fela's music, Fela was actually, he also evolved in his consciousness with respect to music. At first, he was doing he was experimenting, and then he met this lady that changed his ideology about African struggle. He embodied that struggle, and his music became a tool for that. So, do I have expectations of many Nigerian artists? I don't think so. Just the same way I don't have expectations from our writers. When we look at the last 2 decades or the last 3 decades of how art has been structured or shaped, first of all, we were coming from a point where history was literally relegated to the back end. We're talking about an entire generation that was raised on the diet of imperialist content. At my maybe 7-10-year-old self, I knew more about America than I knew about Nigeria or Africa. So I started to do a catch-up as an adult, trying to know more about the country. My point is, who are the writers that shaped our generation? I don't know. Who are the music artists that shaped our generation? Apart from Fela, we can talk about Ebenezer Obey or Sunny Ade or Onyeka Onwenu. They were not necessarily people that I would consider, apart from 1 or 2 songs Onyeka embodied about that. I don't see, so we are trying to solve a problem when we haven't addressed the cause. I'm saying that we have undermined our history as a people. We have a generation that is disconnected and perhaps permit me that word, it gets a little tricky here. Disincentivized or disincentized about their role as citizens. right? About their roles as citizens. So we're still talking about a generation that is still trying to grapple with, should I even vote for an election? We're still talking about a generation that is thinking the best way to fulfill my dreams is to travel out of this country. So we have raised a generation that is short on ownership, that is short on citizenship, and that is just big on commercial, on art. So people who got into music, it was more like a hustle gig. I'm coming into music because I can be famous, I can make revenue. And it was like Tola said, there is still the recipe of commerce, the capitalist structure of making the music that will sell the most. Many music that we are making today, I don't think they have enduring legacy. Most of them are made for the hype. Most of them are made to just trend, but they're not made to endure. And they're not made to shape culture. They're not made to shift climates. They're not made to engage. They're just made to bring revenues. And my point is, we need a different type of artist to be able to develop make music as a tool. And this conversation, yes, music is important, but apart from a writer like Chimamanda Adichie, that I know she's the forefront voice in trying to shape our thinking around feminism, whether it's through our short stories. I mean, I'm a fan of her work. I've read quite a number of them. And I don't see any other writer that is writing about the social consciousness. Permit me, maybe I'm forgetting them now. But is it Helen Abila, or is it what are the writers we have now? I don't know many of them, right? And I'm still drawing from people like Richard Wright, who wrote about Richard Wright, the Black Boy. And those were the guys that shaped my thinking about citizenship and about my rites of passage to becoming a young adult. So before we start to put the burden on our artists to become more revolutionary with the type of songs they sing, we must ask ourselves, if we prepare them even as children and as young adults to understand that it is not a decision you make because it's good and it's trendy, that it is a moral responsibility, it takes moral courage to become a stand-up voice, to become part of the Sorosoke generation. It's not something you're compelled or contrived to do. You don't manipulate your way into that place. You embody an ideology and your music becomes a tool, and your writing becomes a tool, and everything else that is an expression of art becomes a tool to expand on that consciousness.
Okay, so we're going to move to film, but I want to clarify something about what you said, Ferdy. There are several other writers who are writing, they're writing realistically, they're engaging society. But of course, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie happens to be the most famous of them all. There is Teju Ko, there is Ayobami Adebayo, there is Chigozie Obioma, there is Helen Habila, who's writing about, but like we already established, people write from their own experiences. I think it was someone that said
Nathan John.
Yeah, there is Abubakar Dami Ibrahim. There are so many, that who are writing. But because of the structure, or the lack of a structure, the educational structure, we do not know about them. And now, you said, Ferdy, so we want an artist who sort of understands, you said the moral responsibility. So that now speaks to a different conversation about whether art should have to carry a moral burden or whether art should just be as it is. So if we move to, are we likelier to be impacted by film because of the visual component? And I'm going to give an example. So this year we have, we're in a moment where, after the Sex for Grids, the movement and everything, we had a film this year, Citation, about a girl who's fighting for her education. We have another film, Oloture, about sex trafficking. So it's a better place than music to come because of the visual components. So Peter, we'll go with you. Peter?
Yes, okay, so I saw the Citation movie, so I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and immediately I saw it, I made a thread on Twitter that had about 3,000 retweets. I didn't know about the amount, but for the first time in a long while, all what I wrote there, everyone was agreeing. Guys, men and women, they were all agreeing to what I wrote on that tweet. I said, hey, this panel looks suspicious. The panel in the Citation movie, why are they being so sensible? Why are they like this? And it's not something you get to see every time. Because I've been in universities here in Nigeria. Don't expect them to be that sensible, the professors and all of them. You either see them covering for this or that. So I think if we have more movies like that showing up, and then we see panels that are sensible and we're asking the right question. We're not turning into to the victims and asking them, why are you dressed this way? Why are you doing this way? Perhaps the younger generation coming after us would also have the right orientation to how issues should be addressed when it comes to rape victims and rape accusations. We would know the right things to do. During the time, the outreach that happened on social media about the Chayton issue, people felt it was okay for an accused to go to the person who was accused and arrest the person. No, they accused you of a crime. You should prove that you didn't do this, not arrest the person and say, you accused me of a certain crime and then I'm doing it. But I believe that, yes, movies are good tools that can help people change. Movies are good for social changes, and then it would work no matter how long or how small the messages are in the movie. I was looking at this, I was watching a series recently, Bob at Abisola, and then characters in this movie are Nigerian, in this series are Nigerian. And then they started breaking, so it's a comedy series, and they started breaking stereotypes about Nigerians or Africans. They said, oh, how did you get to Nigeria, into America? You go through, did you trek or have to trek? He said, no, he took a flight and everything. So, you know, and then the main character in the series, he asked her, okay, so she was talking to someone and she said she lived in London before she moved to the US. And, you know, you would have assumed that, no, she just probably came as a refugee, suffering refugee to America. But instead, the movie tries to educate people. So now when Americans watch movies about Nigerians, they don't have a particular stereotype about who we are. They don't start to assume that all of us are working definitely. I mean, I play video games and then people in South Africa asking me, or in Australia asking me if I have lions. That was 2 years ago. They're still asking me if I still have lions. And you know, if they watch more of our media content done in America or in other countries, they get to reorientate their mind about certain perceptions about people. So generally, movies are good, and they are good for, you know, fast learning.
Okay, so Peter, you've raised the very important question of quality. So if people consumed more of media, which has to do with quality, which is something, a fault that, you know, that was pointed out as regards the music. So Samuel, do you think that the quality of films that we're producing have the aesthetic, you know, like the aesthetic power to force change or to impact in any kind of way?
I have this personal mantra that new thinking creates new change. And recently, I'm not up to 10 years from now that we've started creating content that address social vices and ills. The Recitation is one of the few movies that have done it. And that's why I don't put too much burden and onus on people that have decided to take up the responsibility to do something, even if they are not doing it based on our own expectations. And I have been in the space where I understand the back end of how this production goes, from raising money to shoot a movie, from getting quality artists, and to making money from it. The one nairas and the cobbles and all that is involved in, even down to getting investors that actually do believe in your craft to invest into it. It's a very, 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 there's a very, very big gap within that space. And like Fedi said, a lot of people that found themselves within that space where they decided to say, okay, do you know what? I'm going to use my creative space to start a change or start a conversation. Actually did not think about doing it in the first place. They evolved into it. It's part of a journey. And I feel one of the major things the Nigerian movie industry is doing right now is starting that journey. There's a whole lot. And I will not put a certain responsibility on the people that actually, doing something about it. I saw the movie, the one we talked about right now, and there was a whole lot. I was like, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? This is this. And the first thing that came to my mind was, Sam, these people are actually doing something. What are you doing? Like, literally, you can get up, and do exactly and do it better. They're actually doing something. What are you doing? And automatically, I grew a certain sense of empathy towards whatever is being done, rather than being judgmental about it. And the space where we are in right now, I believe the conversation has been started. There's a whole lot of people that are not doing full feature films, that are doing small documentary, like the whole NSAS documentary, and people are loving it with their mobile devices. There are people that are doing short 1 minute, what they call it, documentary, 5 minutes. And for me, it's all about starting the conversation. And I believe it's going to take a bit of a while to get there, simply because the ecosystem does not support artists and the industry going fully into that space where they create crafts in order to start change. They would be victimized. Not only that, also, the system will actually come for them. And there's also the space of saying, okay, we want to do this. How do we get money? I've been speaking to a lot of producers, and we've been talking about creating history of Nigeria in different languages, talking about a whole lot of issues regarding gender-based violence in Nigeria. This requires money. This requires money, and we know how it is, like, back in this space, especially when there's a whole lot of difficulty happening financially globally. That struggle is 10 times. So for us to get to that stage, I totally believe that it's a collective effort. It's a community, from investors down to producers, down to directors, down to writers, down to actors, and an ecosystem that actually supports it. But in the meantime, do I believe that what they have created has started a bit of change? I don't think so, but I feel that the conversation has started, and that's the most important thing, starting.
Okay, Sola, do you think that the films that we have that are coming out? So the Citation, there is Oloture, there's also Ife, which is about it's the first Nigerian film to center lesbian women. So it raises the point that Samuel made about the institution coming for artists who try to strike out in a different direction. So you have the National Board of Censors, they try to stop the premiere of the film. So do you think that if a film like this shows, that the fear that they have is going to be challenged effectively?
Ife is
Yeah.
a place.
Yeah,
So I would like to start by addressing your earlier question and then dovetailing into your latter question. See, Citation is good, but Citation is like talking in an echo chamber. This is no criticism of the film. Citation is essentially made for people on the timeline. Let's just keep it all the way real. Most Nigerians are watching Asaba Wood films. They are watching Yoruba Wood films. They are not watching Citation. That's just the fact of the matter right here. So yes, I think films have a greater capacity for change than music, because they tend to be watched together. People tend to argue about the events of the films. And then, we have this habit, this national cultural habit of moralizing through our films. What's the lesson learned? Where the villain gets into the village square and confesses and all is well, and they know the root cause of the problem, the insect in the spinach has been discovered, blah, 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 all that. I think it behooves artists, filmmakers that is, to make films that speak to what's actually going on, not them regurgitating stories that they have been told of what's going on. So every third film, Juju, every third film, Wicked Woman, nobody's actually examining the truth that's being presented on the screen. Instead, they are perpetuating it. For example, I have a thing I always say, Yoruba films are toxic. They are dangerous to women.
Yes.
They are dangerous to poor people. They don't promote hard work. They don't promote any gender inclusivity. They don't promote a woman actually having a point of view and being able to stand on her own. They don't promote unity between young and married people and whatever. Yoruba films are toxic, especially against women. Yes, they're churned out and they are watched by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Nigerians every week. These are not the same people watching your Oloture or whatever, Oloture or Citation. It is at that level that we need to change minds. It is at that level that we need to understand that, okay, these films are a really powerful dissemination tool of where we need to get society to. So when I say Oloture and Citation are speaking to the timeline, it's like you're essentially preaching to the choir, because there are things in there are things that are being highlighted in Citation. I haven't seen Citation, by the way. I've just seen the blurb, the trailer of the film. Yes, but I have seen Oloture, right? There are things in both films, from what I know, that you can't speak about on the timeline without people rounding on you. You know, if you, for example, if you say, oh, a woman was raped and some fool says, what was she wearing? Before you leave Twitter that day, your mentions will be dancing at Ilogu, because people are not going to let you get away with saying that, right? So it's like we are speaking to each other. Do you get what I'm saying? So the people on the ground are sort of removed from the body of the conversation. When the film censors board goes to review a Yoruba film, they essentially know what they're going to see there. In fact, I'm almost certain they fast forward to the middle, fast forward to the end. Oh yeah, okay, fine, go and print your film. It is when they get those Netflix film, the cinema film, that they come with a magnifying glass and watch it scene by scene by scene by scene.
Your glasses are magnified.
Do you understand? They're essentially trying to put up a gate in front of the informed and accessed generation, the ones who can go on Twitter, who can go on Netflix, who can go on YouTube. They are guarding what we see, because they know that our voices are the loudest. So they don't want us to see something, but they're fooling themselves now. If I want to watch a film with gay people in it, I know where to go. If I want to watch a film with lesbian kissing, I know where to go. Do you understand? I'm not waiting for Nigeria films to come out before I know how to think, I know how to be progressive. I'm not waiting for that. But somehow the film censorship board has convinced itself that it's protecting people like us in this chat right now, but they're not, because we all know how to use our phones. Do you understand? So to your question, if rather, see, I don't even know what the problem with the premiere and all that. The film is never going to go to the cinemas. You know, last it will end up on Netflix, or maybe the BBC will pay for it. One of these foreign orgs will pick it up, right? But on the flip side, I commend them for doing that. I absolutely commend them for doing that. Because for how long are we going to bow in the face of this old, gatekeeping, uninformed Luddites who add nothing to the creative economy but to stop people from expressing themselves, because they themselves have not bothered to update their thinking, their outlook, the creative potential of these films being made and these films being watched. They're stuck in the 1970s. You know, they don't add anything. All they do is to erect gates in front of creativity and ultimately productivity. You know, so yes, I commend them for daring to do the premiere. You know, and I commend them for being out there like, yo, lesbians exist in Nigeria. It's not a figment of somebody's imagination. There are queer people in Nigeria today living healthy and loving lives. I mean, it's, you know, so yes, on that front, I commend them for doing it. Like, well, part of me is like, don't bother with these people. Just carry your film, go Netflix, you know? So it's complicated. Films are super important, yes, but I think at the level to which they make the most difference, nothing is going on but poison. Yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Yeah. So thank you. We have only a minute left. So thank you, everybody. Ferdy, would you give us, you know, a sentence? What would you say to people who keep on bringing back films about juju and people confessing in the village? Instead of, you know, looking forward, what would you tell them briefly? Your audio is off again.
Because at the end of every artist is a reflection of his consciousness. And if you look at the Renaissance period, or you look at the Enlightenment age, they were all influencing themselves, whether they were movie makers or they were writers or they were illustrators. They were all part of the cultural conversation and they were influencing themselves. And I think there's a zeitgeist going on now. We have a couple of people emerging, and I love what Citation is doing. Like Ibitola said, it is a good step, but it's not enough. How do we cascade that conversation downstream? So people who are making movies for Asaba, for the Igbo movie industry, the Yoruba movie industry, can expand their conversation from body shaming, reinforcing stereotypes, to helping them come into the conversation of saying, see, the world is changing. Don't just stick there to tell people this is how you should be. There is tolerance. There is a sense of equality. And I think we need to have that. There is not enough grants. Personally, I don't even think there's a grant in Nigeria that can support causes. So every artist has to navigate the tension of balancing my investors. I'm a filmmaker, so I understand that tension. how do I get my money back for my investors is an important one, because there is no patient capital in Nigeria that is going nowhere. Everybody's investing for a return. So we need to find that balance. But so we don't spend so much time, I think that my own closing remarks would be, we should all embrace the change that has come and use our art, whether we are filmmakers or writers or storytellers of any kind, or even influencers. We should lend our platform to shaping an enlightened society, to breaking stereotypes, challenging age-old practices, pushing back the boundaries, and bringing Nigeria more into the 21st century. If art is not about progressivism, it's not art at all.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Judith is finally here. Do you
Hi,
hear
Judith.
us?
Hi, Judith. You missed out the source.
Yeah, are you? I don't know if she's.
I think her
Hello.
picture's frozen.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Peter, Tola, Ferdy, Samuel, and Judith. It's such an enlightening conversation. So yeah, our time is up.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for having me.
So-
And it was my
Yeah, table shakers. You could click the button at the
Thank you.
the top right corner, the leave button to exit.
cheers.
Yeah.